For the ages, the dinosaur fandom has been utterly obsessed with the range, diversity, and the size of the megatheropods, nature's ultimate terrestrial killers, and there's no reason not to. People are fascinated by the idea of big, scary monsters with meat cleavers in their maws, or car-crushing bites running rampant, inflicting terror, pain, and death, to their least favorite rivaling theropod in them little who would win scenarios, or spite matchups, I guess. And just when we all hailed a king for the top, a new specimen suddenly comes out, which changes the tide of the podium, and only two theropods, apparently, are worthy of the title of tyrant amongst the forces of megatheropods, Tyrannosaurus himself and his only rival, Giganotosaurus. The internet's already obsessed with this particular topic, and thousands of people love to milk off every single size estimate in the subject. Today, we're going to shed some light onto everyone's favorite big bad killer and evaluate its true size at the end for a definitive ranking. And while I wasn't initially aware of this, apparently there's some weight behind Dr. Isaac Wilson's infamous jokes, to the rage of his impudent haters, especially surrounding one particular dinosaur I want to focus on in this video, that being the titular Giganotosaurus. Aside from the controversy surrounding how to pronounce his name, I had literally no idea that Giganotosaurus had fanboys. Why? This most likely because of the issue I will address in a future video, but it really boils down to the fact that Tyrannosaurus is famous for a reason, which is its imposing mass, and is so widespread that the fact has become a stereotype. And people don't like to be stereotypes, so some will just try to go on a different train to make a name for themselves. It's part of being human to be inspired and try out new different things, and it should be expected that another person would want to see something different for once. Honesty, however, that's something else entirely. And the fact is that, for the lot of us dinosaur fans, one would take a step back at this matchup and find that though the results are close, it is Tyrannosaurus who is still consistently bigger. So for the relief of probably half of you, T-Rex is bigger than Higa for my standard. You can click off. But for us with brains, let us learn and know. So, how big was Giganotosaurus? Usually the infamous paratype specimen consisting of a large dentary is used as a basis for a rivalry with a tyrant king. Some argue this to be a result of individual variation, or basically it's a Higa with a big jawline, as this stuff sort of happens frequently in extinct animals, right? Now, there are two problems with approaching this way of thinking. One is that we have literally no evidence to suggest this. Not a single piece of bone somewhere else. The fossil is so fragmentary. It's a jaw. It's literally half of one. And all we have is a band of Higa-hating T-Rex fanboys who would like this to be true, unironically. Speaking of which, is that this line of thinking is derived from Tyrannosaurus, an animal who has lots of skull material found. We have over 40 Rexes, but only 2 Higas. The possibilities are endless to tell this animal's size from what we know. And, because of racial scaling, we will assume that Giganotosaurus MUCPV 95 is bigger than its holotype specimen. But how much bigger? Now here's where things get a little messy. Larramendi and Molina Perez claim this animal to be 6.5% larger than its holotype. Okay, that's cool, but there are several other methods, some of which claim as much as 8% to 5.4% to only 2.2%. So which is it? There are ways to tell. 8% was rooted out of a study that claims so, but does not give us any info on how the authors arrived at this conclusion. 2.2% is taken from the same authors, and this time from a description of Mopasaurus of all things, which puts the holotype's dentary at 135 millimeters and the paratypes at 138 millimeters. 6.5 is the most commonly accepted and was taken from Scott Hartman and the other two scientists I talked about earlier from their famous book. Since they are doctors in their field, one would say this is the most reliable, but however, the post I gathered this info from actually comes from a third-party source on DeviantArt, whose name is Theropod1. Now, while we're here, I want to take the time to address this issue with third-party sources. They are not unreliable. A lot of the fandom, especially teenagers, have a very hard time accepting size estimates that don't align with their favorite dinosaur being the biggest, or just hate anything that's not part of their preconceived agenda. In fact, most of these paleontological sources people cite tend to be outdated. For literally every single source, you should take the time to learn and read why they state this to be the case, not just blindly accept everything you hear. And when you do, you'll be surprised to see how many third-party sources tend to be accurate, especially when people like this person use literal picture evidence to arrive to conclusions. Diagrams. I bet there's still one extreme T-Rex fanboy who still won't accept the evidence. Also, if I need to shock you more, random dino skeletal diagrams are also third-party, and people use these things to get sued to 10 tons. So the fact people will accept Tyrannosaurus size from third-party sources but not Giganotosaurus says a lot about what they really want to hear. So keep that in mind as I cite his works. But with this theropod one comes to a reasonable size ratio of 5.1% using diagrams. Alright, for whatever reason, one T-Rex fanboy mad. Okay, for the rest of the 999 of you watching, let us continue, shall we? He then uses a multitude of evidence that suggests that the holotype Giganotosaurus femur tends to have a higher circumference than most average Tyrannosaurus specimens, and then uses this to assert that on average, Giganotosaurus was in fact heavier than Tyrannosaurus. Now, I know this is true for the lower ends for reasons I mentioned in my previous videos, but the fact is that Tyrannosaurus contains a higher volume than Giganotosaurus due to being fat or more robust, and therefore usually is heavier. However, these sizes are very comparable in most cases, and he arrives to a final conclusion of 7.9 tons for the dentary specimen. This may sound a little small to all you see here, say, dinosaur fans, as we've all heard about Giganotosaurus sailing 10.6 tons hot. So can we do that? Oh yes, right. We multiply the holotype's mass by 5.1% extra to get something for the paratype. We could do that, but there are things that are going to get complicated, so hang tight. When we say the word 5.1% bigger, it's extremely vague, and the problem with this method is that because of the square cube law, that is, when you double the size of an object, its surface area increases by 4 and its mass increases by 8. This is because an object's volume increases faster than its surface area, as it can now hold more space inside. To put this into perspective for our subject, doubling its dimensions would increase its femur circumference by 4-fold to avoid being so heavy it injures itself. All bone is bone, and the more meat on the bone means more stress on the bone. Simultaneously, its volume becomes 8 times larger. So what does this tell us? That if we multiply the Giga holotype mass by 5.1% to get the dentary's mass, this wouldn't work, as we need to find the dimensions of the holotype and the paratype's length to figure out how much extra volume the paratype can contain over the holotype. So in other words, we use length to find mass, not mass to find length. So if we find that the Giga dentary is 5.1% bigger than the holotypes, therefore, the Giga dentary's hypothetical body length is logically 5.1% longer than the holotype, right? Simple. And then we divide the length of the dentary by the length of the holotype, and then cube that number to account for volume, and then multiply the mass of the holotype by that number. If you're still lost, here's the formula. Alright, so we know what to do now, hooray! But how big was the holotype Giganotosaurus? Well, the famous paleontologist Dan Folks, a repeatedly cited expert on Giganotosaurus, lists its size at around 9 tons flat and 12.7 meters in length. This seems to be pretty consistent with other sources, putting it at 12.4 meters long, 8.8 tons, etc. And this is sourced from 2025, so it's reliable in my book. 12.7 times 1.051 equals 13.34 meters. Now for mass, 1.051 times 1.051 times 1.051 equals 1.051 cubed, 1.161. 1.161 times 9 equals 10.45 tons. And it seems that 10.6 tons for Giganotosaurus is a little consistent, at least. I'd like you to note that he used a density of 0.99 instead of 0.95, but we're going to go with it, I guess. But if you really don't like that, and I don't either to be honest, then the paratype yields a mass of 10 tons flat. Bigger than T-Rex? Longer, yeah. Heavier? Not quite. Can we go higher? Yes and no. The new study that encourages us to account for realistic amounts of soft tissue when calculating mass doesn't give a formula for Acrocanthosaurus. However, Dan Folks also earlier this year has an allegedly bad calc putting Giganotosaurus at 11 tons, and yes, I kind of agree with this assertion, I guess. But although at first this may seem unlikely, there are ways around this, as its calculation was made with a more accurate density of 0.97. This is important, because we can fix this by rewinding the calculation without the specific gravity of 0.97 and multiply it from 0.95 from there. This yields a mass estimate of 10.89 tons, almost 11 tons of Giganotosaurus. But unfortunately, that's about the highest we could get. And doing so with every megatheropod mentioned in the second video at the end actually comes to show us that the gap in size between megatheropods isn't as big as we all used to think. So is our beloved Giganotosaurus bigger than T-Rex? No. Longer? Maybe. And where does it and its relatives rank in the megatheropod hierarchy? Here is as such. But how do I get these estimations? If you want to see a video on that, let's see. Get this video to 1,000 views and 10 likes. Sounds like a lot, but I've seen you guys do it before. But thanks for watching. This video was slightly extensive, but I guess thanks for your patience. I thought I needed to shed some true light onto this dinosaur. It's one of my favorites all the time. And I'm sure it's one of your favorites too. But anyway, see you all in the next video.